Washington's top target is back on the market.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports' Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Lars got a really fun show coming at all the everydayers today. We're going to talk about Brennan Carroll and the news of his dad, Pete Carroll, taking the job of the Las Vegas Raiders. Seen some speculation of, hey, is that going to spur a move? We'll get there. Don't worry. We've got a lot of thoughts on that one. We're also going to talk about some of our favorite names in the 2026 class as we kind of, move forward with spring, summer, as guys are going to start taking unofficial visits for spring practice. There are a lot of names that the everydayers need to know about. Stick around for that, because the very first name on that list, and Lars, I think both of our opinions, is four-star quarterback Brady Smigel, who, as we sat down to record this on Sunday afternoon, little peek behind the scenes, we changed the whole show around to make sure we could talk about this first. He has decommitted from Florida State.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worst kept secret in college football. Like, let's be real. Like, when you're considering Florida State, and remind me, what was Florida State's record this past season?
Bad.
Yeah. And who told you it was going to be bad? Just real quick.
You, I'll give you all the credit for that.
So the reason I'm not taking a victory lap on this, but it just always seemed like he committed to Florida State really early on in the process, back when Mike Norvell was still kind of riding that CFP wave at the end of the 23 season. And you think about, okay, I can see the understanding for why he wanted to commit early, secure a spot with a P4 school. But now, after he took the visit to Washington, I know he took a couple of other visits as well after Washington back in December, January period. And it was kind of like, okay, when I heard he was close to heavily considering Washington, but he didn't commit, I was like, okay, but he's taking all these visits, so something is coming. Like he's going to back away in some way, shape, or form. And I think it's actually good on Brady that he didn't just flip to Washington or flip to another school, because it's still too early on in the process for a guy like him to say, like, hey, this is guaranteed where I'm going. Because you look at a bunch of schools, including Washington, quarterback situation kind of murky in the sense of how would Brady fit in short and long term.
So let's talk about that real quick, because I think you said that perfectly, because he told On3's Hayes Fawcett all his top schools right now, or the schools that are standing out. It's Michigan, Ohio State, South Carolina, UCLA, Washington are right there at the top of that list. I think there might be one other one in there, but those are the ones that Michigan. We've heard a lot about. I said Michigan, yeah. Those are like right there at the top of the list for him. He's got a whole bunch of offers. I don't have the number right here next to me, but enough offers that he really can go anywhere that he wants in the country. And it's really interesting because, Lars, you and I have talked about him on this show for a while as, hey, this is like Washington has struggled to recruit quarterbacks in the 2026 class. There's no secret about that. And there's a pretty obvious reason why. It's Demond Williams. And that's not a bad thing. That's just, hey, a lot of these guys, these top quarterbacks that are considering Washington, might not be willing to sit a year, maybe 2 years if Demond wants to play his senior year before they can even have a chance to fight for the job, because of everything that he brings to the table. So it's just an interesting thing to consider there, where Brady has always been the guy. And there's been no secret about that either, where he visited Washington before he committed to Florida State. He visited again after. And then Washington goes down, visits him at Newberry Park as soon as the contact period opens up. So there's a lot of mutual interest there. And I believe he said before on the record that I'm only going to take visits to schools that I'm really confident and comfortable in my relationship with. And a lot of this decommitment seems to be coming from not just a Washington angle, where I certainly consider them among, if not the favorite at this point in time. But I look at it and I say, Ohio State visits him, as we record this on Sunday, visited him yesterday on Saturday. So there's a lot of big time interest there, and good on him for, as you said, for taking a step back and is going to slow play it. I'm sure it's going to take a bunch of official visits, and I'd be surprised if Washington isn't one of those first schools to receive a visit from him.
Well, and the only thing I'll push back on is being the first, because I can also see them getting the last visit for a different reason, in terms of, okay, if I visit Washington first, now I'm going to visit Washington last because I know that's the school that I have the most respect for, et cetera. I'm not saying Brady said that. In his head, if that's going to be the last visit, that would be why. But I also think, I mean, guarantee they're going to get in the official business. That's a safe bet. You just kind of look at it and think, well, you're looking at the other schools that he's competing in. Like, let's talk about it. Like, Julian Sayin seems to be the odds-on favorite to win the Ohio State job. He's got 2 more years left at Ohio State. Deshonne really only has this year and then theoretically 26. So if Brady comes – again, I know Jedd says he's got 4 years with Deshonne. Let's see how this goes.
It's more of just like an eligibility thing where, because it's the same thing with Julian Sayin, where technically he's still got 4 years of eligibility remaining. So it's just that, like, that's something that needs to be considered in all this.
Exactly. And that's why when you look at it and think, well, why wouldn't he just commit to Washington right now? Well, let's be real.
There's no reason.
Exactly. And I think that's what, that's what makes it, frustrating to cover recruiting, where it's like, a guy's certainly high on a school and you say, well, why is he committed? And it's like, it's not for the lack of the kids one. It's just, it would almost be disingenuous on Brady to commit right now. And I think that's why he backed off his Florida State commitment. He's not even considering Florida State his new list of schools. So what does that tell you about, A, the state of the Seminoles program, but also B, okay, well, just because the guy committed, and let's kind of maybe bridge this off in a way where you mentioned that, like, he's clearly the number one, but they offered another one out of Orem, Utah. Names escape me. I think it's Tyson something.
Yeah.
But they offered him recently, Tyson Kawwa, Kaawa. And so you look at that and think 3-star out of Utah. They've been trying to make a lot of inroads in the state of Utah. Hilarious that Jake Tickert said there's not a lot of talent in the state of Washington and Utah. Just like neither here nor there. Anyway, but beside the point, you look at those. So they're still entertaining other quarterbacks. You can't put all your bread in the Brady basket, as much as we both know they are, and in the way that they want to. But when you look at the roster that UW has, where you have Dash Beerley and Tristan Keeney McMillan as 2 true freshmen this season, both of them, well, I'm going to make a prediction right now. One of them won't redshirt.
Okay.
Now, because again, the reason why I say that is for eligibility, as you just touched on, you want a redshirt freshman, a sophomore, and then Deshonne goes into 26 as a junior, as a true junior. So now you have some staggered progression in that room. And so that way you can pitch to somebody, hey, this is your track. This is your progression. We're going to need to recruit quarterbacks on a yearly basis. And Brady doesn't seem like a guy who's afraid of competition, where if him and Dash had to come in and compete for it, and then Dash maybe, 2 years down the road, if Dash wanted to go, let's say he loses the opportunity and doesn't win out the job, then sure, then that's just the nature of college football. You go find your spot. Look at every quarterback. I mean, Malik Murphy is a perfect example. I said, well, he's a fantastic 4-star out of Texas, went to Duke, now at Oregon State. If you're a quarterback and you're good, you need to move to find a spot to play. That's just the nature of college football these days. So when you see attrition yearly in the room or on a biannual basis, don't be surprised. That's not for a lack of Jedd doing anything or a lack of a player's talent. It's just in this day and age in college football, guys got to get snaps. And so that's just how it's going to break down.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like where you're going with there. But just before we move on with Brady, I want to just take a second here to talk about what kind of impact he would have on, I don't want to say this program, but on the 26 class, because this is a guy who, let's just say, hypothetically, he does commit to Washington. He instantly becomes the highest ranked recruit to commit to Jedd Fisch during his time at Washington, be the first top 100 player to do so. And he's the kind of guy that you need to see in this 26 class, where Jedd was really, really ambitious and talked about making 2025 the best class in UW history. Obviously, he came up short of that. But getting a guy like Brady into the 26 class shows that, hey, all those goals that Jedd set, maybe he was just a little early on them. And if he's able to really build on a strong foundation that he had on the recruiting trail in 25 in 2026, that's a great sign moving forward, because there's a lot to like about what he has to sell in terms of, quarterback development and different things like that. And for a kid like Brady, who took a big step forward especially as a rusher this season, there's a lot to like and a lot to say. All right, yeah, he's somebody who really would develop well under Jedd Fisch. And Lars, he's not the only one. There are a lot of really interesting names in the 2026 class that would look pretty good in purple and gold, if I do say so myself. Which we'll get to right after a message from our friends over at TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return will get you real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. So you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. So Lars, as we look at the 2026 class, I think that the one name that we both wrote our little list that we wanted to come to the table with, the first guy on both of our lists was 3-star wide receiver Rico Blassingame. Now, this is somebody who, just a little background on him, is originally from the state of Washington, moved down to Arizona, where he's at Tolleson Union High School, and he was a really, really high priority for wide receivers coach Kevin Cummings when he was down in Arizona. And then Washington and Jamarcus Shepard offered him just 6 days later. And this was back in 2023. And that interest has, stayed between Kevin Cummings and Rico Blassingame. And he was just up on campus for an unofficial visit over the weekend. And one more little thing, as somebody who grew up in the state of Washington, when he first got his offer from UW, he said, "This is my dream school." So just an interesting little note to throw in there.
The old dream school line. Like, I think, you really see that less and less nowadays because and I'm sure you've asked kids this when we talk to recruits throughout time. Like, hey, do you have like a dream school or like any like kid that you grew up watching as a kid? How often do they end up signing with their dream school? I mean, but I will say from this reason, when you talk about getting Desmond Roebuck in the 25 class out of Arizona, Jedd knows the talent that's in the state of Arizona. Kevin Cummings knows the talent that's in the state of Arizona. So when you look, and again, for all the fans that say, "Oh, another 3-star, look at the production Desmond put up. Look at the production Blassingame puts up. The size at 6'3", 180. Like, beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
He's got great body control, too.
But even better. Like, my point is, it's like 6'3". Like, that's what we're looking for. Now, again, you always hear the, hey, well, 6'1". I remember Juice Brown. I remember Juice Brown being like, 5'10's an average CB height. I'm like, yeah, but let's be real. Let's not go down that road because, again, it's like, you can have a 5'10", 6 foot wide receiver that, has good ball skills and stuff like that. But you need those Justice Williams, those Denzel Boston, those 6'3" guys that you can just put on the outside and say, You know what, go get it. Go figure it out. And you mentioned the same thing with his body control. That's one thing that I kind of throw in Denzel in that same kind of comparison mold. That's one thing we've seen Denzel get a lot better with Cummings at. So if you're telling me he already has good body control as a high schooler, that's why you look at everything about Jedd's staff and really college football recruiting to a degree is projectability. Does this guy project in our system? Those measurables? Yeah, those project.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the nicest thing about him is he is a really nice, well-rounded player already at this point in his career, multi-sport athlete. And those are all the things you like to see. But I just can't help but think about what this wide receivers class might look like because there's a lot of really interesting talents. And there's another guy who I really like from Archbishop Reardon High School where, it's been good to Washington in recent years with getting 4-star Chris Lawson in the 2025 cycle and Peter Lange before he backed off, is 3-star Sinai Thomas. This is another guy in that same mold where he's big, long. I think he's listed at 6'2", 160 right now. So a little bit on the lighter side, but is somebody who can obviously, as all these kids do, gain weight once they get to the college level, especially with that kind of frame. It's the same thing. He's got nice long speed and just is a good all-around prospect that in this class of wide receivers, it's probably going to be 2, 3, as you and I have talked about. But you want to take some of these guys that are projectable, especially with this 2025 class. Lars, if 1 or 2 of these guys burn their red shirts, we're not going to be surprised. That's something we're going to certainly get to a little bit later on as we go through the offseason. But I look at Sinai Thomas and say a guy like that is exactly the kind of threat that you want in this offense. But it's not just wide receiver because another guy who we really need to bring up, one of your favorite players in the 27 class who did just reclassify to 2026 is modern-day tight end Mark Bowman.
Yeah, it's one thing when we brought him up in the last time on the show, and I said, man, it'd be really nice if Mark reclassified to 26. I'll be honest, I wasn't hearing sources on that. That was just happenstance, so I do want to clarify that. But no, this is a situation where, and I'll peel back the curtain a little bit here, before Dash Beerley enrolled at Washington, after his championship game with Modern Day, I asked him just a couple questions about guys coming down the pike. Hey, like what's Marcus Harris? What's he going to be like? And then I said, have you gotten to talk to Mark Bowman yet? Like, have we discussed that one yet? And at the time, he was a 27 kid, so I was thinking as a sophomore, it's going to be a ways down the road. This is why getting Dash, in my opinion, out of Modern Day was so important because you've already seen it with Marcus Harris. There's a number of other Modern Day guys that they're looking at. having that relationship, like Mark was like, aside from Mark Sarris, the only other consistent target for Dash in terms of like not for what matter they has, but for just who Dash really would go to.
Just who he had chemistry with. Yeah,
exactly. It wasn't going. It was like if Marcus is double team, go to Mark. If Mark's double team, go to Marcus. And I think that having that relationship, worth noting, he did put out his top 12. Washington was not among that list. But as I brought up to you before the show, you look at Washington's tight ends room, you look at the list of 12. This is kind of bringing back the whole Brady Smigel conversation where you look at who are the schools he's looking at, where it's like, okay, I think over the next, I put this out on Twitter, over the next 2 to 3 months, I wouldn't be surprised if Washington found their way back in that top 12 mix, maybe get him on campus for an unofficial visit. Because you look at the tight end room, Quentin Moore will be gone. Ryan Otten's probably gone after this season. After that, could you name the next graduating tight end aside from Decker DeGraff?
Ooh, it would probably be one of those true freshmen. Yeah, it's Baron Nahone, Austin Simmons.
Exactly, or Charlie Crow. And
it's Kate Eldridge. It's Kate Eldridge.
There we go. Okay, but again, either way, my point is we're struggling to find names in this room. And that's not for a lack of what Pow has done. It's just like they need bodies in that room. And you look at the chemistry that Mark has with Dash. If I'm those two, it's like why not run that back? Who was it was Kyle McCord and was it MJ2 or Marvin Harrison, right? That they played in high school together with 1 year, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was like, oh, that's an interesting conversation though, where you'd love to see that happen, right? And maybe reclassifying to 2026 will change some things around for them. Where if Washington does want to sell that early playing time, like they did with Decker DeGraff, where that's certainly a way back in. Plus the whole Dash Bailey, Marcus Harris factor. Those are all really interesting things to consider. And Lars, it's something we talked about the other day, but we need to turn this conversation to the running backs, where a guy who I talked about Brian Bonner on, as the Everydayers know, on an episode last week, is a guy I really, really like. It's because I cannot get my hopes up about Deshonne Rideaux. And I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form to knock Scottie Graham, because I just love that kid's talent. And I would just, I would be so excited. That's the easiest way to say it, to see him in purple and gold, because that kid, we talked about Thunder and Lightning in terms of what Scottie Graham likes to do with Washington's combinations of running backs. He is the ultimate form of that, because he's not just somebody who, can be a gadget guy in terms of a slot receiver, running back, line him up the backfield, line him up all over the formation, because he can do all those things too. But he can also be that bell cow for you, where you need somebody like that take 20, 25 carries a game. He's got Washington in his top 10. Washington had a huge contingent of guys down at Oaks Christian to check out him, Devon Benjamin, Joseph Pecco, the son of Domitah Pecco. Huge fan, by the way. Another name I just want to make sure I drop in there really quickly. Joseph Pecco, I would love to see, just as an addition at defensive tackle. That's one of my top targets on the West Coast. But Deshonne Rideaux is, I would be overjoyed to see that kid at Washington.
I have a hunch Justice Williams and Deshonne played together at least 1 year at Oaks Christian. I'm going out of the limit saying that. And I think that's also why, you look at some of the other guys that are coming back that we haven't seen yet. Like if Justice can pop off, that's now a guy that you say, hey, look, we got the Oak Christian pipeline. And I know Josh Calvert didn't necessarily work out, as everybody thought he would. But, it's neither here nor there. Oak Christian has always been a school where it used to be like one of these schools in California would say, oh, we just signed a recruit out of Oaks Christian. Cool, he's a dude.
Yep.
Like you just know for a fact they're full of dudes. And the other thing about Deshonne is he was actually offered by Washington's previous staff. I think Kalen DeBoer and those guys offered him. So he's well versed with Washington. So I think that also helps Jedd Fisch in this cause. And this brings me back to my other point. Ansu's 6'2", 215, somewhere in that ballpark.
210, 215.
Jordan McMahon, 6'2", 220, 230, already according to the UW's bio on the official roster. Terrifying, but good. So you look at, I was running through the list of running backs and everything that you're missing that lightning. Deshonne Rideaux could be that perfect lightning. And I think the fact that they're showing such a heavy emphasis on those guys, and we always talk about you keep the California guys, keep the West Coast guys home before you start to spread your wings. I'm not saying they're going to end up with him, but I would not be surprised if they end up getting an official visit out of him and being one of those 3 or 4 schools with a hat on the table at the end of it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, because that's one of those things where you look at with him and Brian Bonner, if you are able to take one of those two guys, that's a huge benefit to you, because it just continues what what Scottie Graham's ultimate plan is at running back, whereas to have a stable. It's not, hey, we want to rely on this one guy. It's, I like two different types of running backs. I like a between the tackles, just run downhill with power sort of guy that you can use a lot in the red zone, you'll use a lot on the goal line, and then somebody with just truly elite speed. And it's fun. It's really interesting when you're taking two running backs in a class, which is something that I think until further notice, we should just expect from Scottie Graham and this coaching staff is they're going to take two running backs a year and really just try to load up that room where every once in a while we'll see a transfer due to attrition. Maybe somebody like Adam Muhammad really does blow up over the next year or two. So it's just, it's interesting to think about what the rotation at that position can look like. But yeah, either one of those guys, Redeaux or Brian Bonner would be a fantastic addition to this class. It's not going to be easy, but those were certainly names that we wanted to make sure we throw out there. And Lars, there's some interesting developments in the coaching staff that we should really get into. Right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel, because Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59. So Lars, let's just start here. Brennan Carroll, his father Pete Carroll, took the head coaching job at the Las Vegas Raiders. We've seen a lot of speculation. Yeah, shout out to Pete Carroll. Seen a lot of speculation going around. I doubt that Brennan is going to follow him, but it's still a conversation that needs to be had.
So, yeah, I mean, here's the thing that kind of intrigued me about this. So, Brennan was with Pete from 2004-05 to 09 when he was at USC as a grad assistant tight end coach. Him and Jedd both went up to UW with Pete Carroll in 2010. And then I did forget about the time
up to Seattle.
Up to Seattle. What did I say? Up to UW?
UW. little early.
Right. I realized, okay, did I say UW in that? But yeah, no. And so then I forgot that they actually, Pete Carroll and Brennan linked back up in Seattle in 2015 to 2020 when he was like a run game coach, assistant, all that. Well, it was like on the staff, but wasn't like a full-time offensive coordinator. Here's the problem the reason why I bring this up all together. He went back to Pete for 2015 to 2020 in the NFL. Okay, so I can see that making sense. But that was before he hooked up with Jedd as an OC and really started to kind of build himself out. If this was, let's say, Brennan getting a head coaching job at the Eric Schmidt route, North Dakota, or UNLV, or I could see that making sense because it's a upward move. Brennan doesn't call the plays, mind you. So if Brennan's going to be an OC for his dad, this is different than Bill Belichick and Steve Belichick, where Steve knows the playbook inside and out. And not that Brennan doesn't, but Pete's more of a defensive guy. Brennan's the offensive guy in that mix. So does Pete then say, hey, you know what, son? You call plays. You build your own up. I doubt it. My point is, I doubt it. My point is, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's the only pitch that I can see where Brennan would say, cool, this is an upward move to the NFL and an upward move in a coaching role. That is the only way this makes sense. I don't see Pete getting that LA or Las Vegas job just to be like, hey, I'm going to hire my son who doesn't have any play calling experience to be my OC, and I'm going to have him figure that out. Because here's the thing. If it goes wrong for both of them in Vegas, what does Brennan do with that? Exactly. Yeah. And so I think Brennan's best bet is to stay with Jedd. There's no reason either. Like, there's no reason to leave Jedd at this point. Like,
I agree.
If this were 2 years from now, we can have a different discussion because he's been with Arizona, been with UW, 6 years as an OC, then grow your wings. But I don't think it's going to be right now.
So I'm with you there. The one thing that I think is interesting to note, where if you take let's just say he takes the offensive line coach job there, it's an interesting project for him to take. I went in and wrote about it a little bit over on Huskies Wire, where that was one of the worst offensive lines in the league last year. They gave it 50 sacks in 2024. So it's something where if he just says, hey, I've done what I can with the UW offensive line, which is not it's not the case. There's still a long way to go in terms of the rebuild there. But if that's how he feels and he wants to take that and just say, I want to take this same sort of project at the NFL level and not recruit anymore, which certainly is a thing for some guys, that's something to consider. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I just want to bring it up in a hypothetical scenario because Lars, I think you and I would have the same answer for this, where under that scenario, if it does happen, Jimmy Doherty takes the offensive coordinator position, does he not?
That's an interesting one because I would say yes. But what would be interesting that you would have to bring in either would you go co-OC or would you just bring an O-line coach and give Jimmy the OC role? Because here's the thing, everything under Jedd, and much we love Jedd, is name and title. That's all it is. There's no role increase. It's not like Jimmy's going to be like calling plays. Because
that's why I say that, where, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter as much as I have, is, bring back Ryan Grubb if that happens. Like, I just want to make sure we said that. Because I highly doubt that something like that would happen. But it's the other reason I talk about Jimmy Doherty in that light is, it certainly is just a title. But Jedd has discussed with us in press conferences that Jimmy is the guy that he bounces more stuff off of in terms of play calling. And it's not because, he trusts him more than Brennan or anything like that. It's because Jimmy is the one up in the box where Brennan is with him on the sidelines to deal with the offensive line. So that's why I just kind of think Jimmy has a little bit more of is a little bit more inside Jedd's mind when it comes to what he wants to call, and just has more synergy with him on the play calling side of things is probably the best way to say that. So that's why I would say, you make him quarterbacks coach and OC, just like Brennan is with the offensive line. And then why not bring in an offensive line coach? Again, we don't think that's going to happen, but it's just a situation that needs to be posed and discussed.
Like if we're going to run back former UW offensive coaches, in that scenario, the one that would make sense would be Scott Huff as the offensive line.
Yeah.
That is the only former UW coach in that tree. I mean, you almost had me tempted to FaceTime Grubb there. Be like, hey, you want to hear a reaction to this? Because I want to see your actual reaction to this thought. Because again, that's not going to happen. And I think the way that we're seeing Jedd, first off, the way we're seeing Jedd build his staff is a lot of former Arizona guys and guys that have a relationship with people on the staff. So we're going to tie this in together in something I posted on Twitter on Saturday night, I think. Yeah, Saturday night. Where Martell Irby, a former UCLA running back turned defensive back turned Arizona State Wildcat defensive back / linebacker apparently at one point in 2023 is now
Arizona Wildcat. Sorry, he said Arizona State. Yeah.
Oh, that's Arizona State. Arizona Wildcat. Arizona University of Arizona Wildcat is now on staff as a defensive quality control coach, and Austin Carr as well is another guy who came from Purdue to rejoin Brian Walters. So the reason why I bring those two names up is Martell Irby only played one season at Arizona in 23, but I think there had to be some relationship with him going back to the UCLA days because Jedd was on staff at UCLA in 2017-18 recruiting him. So I'm assuming there's probably some.
Well, 2017, 18-19 was with the Rams. Yeah.
Okay. So exactly. That makes sense. Cause anyway, long story short, Jedd only goes off of previous relationships. We're clearly seeing that. A lot of guys from Arizona happen to fall under that tree. So when you think about guys that could replace certain people, who are they going to be looking at? It's not that Jedd's not expanding his horizons because as I say that, I don't think he had a relationship with Luke Del Rio directly, but Correct. He knows his dad. And so there's that other side of the relationship where you can bring in somebody you don't know, but you're not going to bring in a Ryan. And that's no slight to Ryan. You're not going to bring in a Ryan Grubb because there's no familiarity. Mike McDonald showed why you don't do that.
But it's also like with the Grubb thing, it's, hey, he's going to want to call plays, which is not going to happen here. I think that's a slightly different avenue as well. But I look at it and I say he's done a good job of that, though, at the same time of expanding some of his horizons. Ryan Walters being the prime example of that. And then going out and getting Taylor Mays as well, where there's no familiarity. There's no connection there. This is a guy from the area with ties, especially, with his dad coaching at O'Day. He's doing a little bit of both. It's slow. And I don't mean that in terms like to knock him or anything, because it's taking risks where they need to be taken, where it's, hey, I'm going to step outside of my comfort zone and hire a defensive coordinator I don't know, but it's one of the best defensive coordinators available. So that's a really nice thing to add. I think one thing that I want to get into, sorry, do you have something else there? Because there's one other thing that I want to make sure we talk about in terms of the coaching staff as well.
I would just say it's measured. The word that I would use would be measured.
I like that. Yeah.
Measured, calculated, all those sorts of things where, okay, I'm going to take a risk. It's a calculated risk.
I agree with you because this is one where a calculated risk might be, in the cards where I'm really curious to see how this is going to work out. And that's the assistant director of recruiting, Armand Hawkins' position, where I don't know how that's going to work out, where would you go with somebody outside the building or would you promote from within and bring in more people in that role that you just talked about? as other recruiters like they did with Fatu Tuitele.
Jedd's going to go external with that one because he would have gone internal already.
I disagree.
Who's your pick for internal? Let me hear that.
So the pick that I would have internally right now would be Jake Crawford, because that's somebody who has been around through multiple staffs and was somebody that Jedd was confident in keeping on for the 2024 season, and just saying, yeah, like, this is a guy who we really like. We want to promote him. We want to make sure that this is somebody who stays around. And I say that where it's somebody who is familiar with Washington, and he's gained some familiarity with Jedd as well, where that's just the name that sticks out to me. Because, we've seen other people stay over through the transition from DeBoer to Fisch, Joyce Harrell being another one, who's the director of on-campus recruiting. And we see people like that staying around with the program because they're people with ties to Washington. They're not people with ties to Fisch, which is really, really important for this kind of position where because Armand was somebody who he came over with Fisch, and it was nice to have him in that role with, Josh O'Mora being another one as well. But I say, why not promote internally there and then bring in somebody who, the guy they hired last season to come on in a recruiting role is Fatu Tuitele. To give an example of somebody who just graduated, and I do this strictly off position as well, where somebody like a Jacob Bandis or a Drew Fowler, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a guy who was around for 6 seasons, and he wants to get into recruiting, he wants to get into that side of things. Yeah, sure, you might as well bring in a guy like that who's young, who's energetic, who knows this program really, really well. And I think that's the best example to give in terms of somebody that you can hire in that role, which, I mean, this, with all due respect, is a lot easier to find and is a little bit more expendable than the assistant director of recruiting.
I agree. The only reason I pushed back on that was because Armand had 2 technical roles. He was the
for sure,
defensive assistant. Like he was an on-field coach. So in terms of, I would agree if you split the position up and give Jake just the assistant director, because I don't know if Jake wants to be a position coach or an on-field role in that capacity. Because otherwise, I firmly agree. Keep it in-house, do it like that. But you still need to go find somebody else to take Armand's safety spot.
No, absolutely. But that's, again, those kinds of positions are like, I know Jake is, defensive line guy, where that's his specialty. But you can find that kind of, I think that's the Taylor Mays role, right? Where that's why you bring in a guy like that and still promote John Richardson to be the overall defensive backs coach, where it's having somebody who can help strictly with the safeties, but also is probably going to provide an off-field boost as well. But Lars, those are all things we're going to get to throughout the offseason, as all the everydayers know. And just like they also know, to make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel through content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. It does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.